Good morning. My name is Christy Taylor, and today I will be presenting my research paper on organizational culture. Now, organizational culture, as defined in our text, is a system of shared values, norms, and assumptions that guide a member's attitudes and behaviors and influences how they perceive and react to their environment. Now, in order to have done my research, I used primarily EBSCOhost, using the journals listed there. I searched for organizational culture, leadership management, culture in a workplace, and found a lot of really helpful information to help support my hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that managers in an organization should set the standard for company culture. We should have teams in place that will help provide a system of checks and balances for managers and for employees to ensure that actions, behaviors, conversation, everything that the company does and everything that the employees within that company do help contribute towards a positive company culture. Culture can be reinforced either positively or negatively, and in order to ensure that we maintain a positive company culture, we need to make sure that everything that we're doing is supporting that culture. Now, culture defines an organization. It empowers the individual and the organization. Without a highly motivated organization, the employees and the organization will also not be motivated. So we want to make sure that both of those things feed each other and that the individuals within the organization know the vision of the organization, know the culture, and everything that they do helps to support that. Culture can obviously shift depending on the location. Obviously, there's different countries, there are different regions, and there are different sectors. Now, if we think about a company in New York and a company in Georgia, those companies probably function very differently. But both of those companies probably vary drastically than how a company in Korea or a company in Germany might have their culture created. So we want to make sure that everything that we're doing within the organization as individuals, as managers, helps to contribute towards that culture, that we are aware of any cultural expectations or cultural norms that we might not be aware of, but we need to make sure that we are doing the research, that we are informing our employees of different standards that we expect from them. A strong culture is what we should all strive for within our organization. We should bear in mind, though, that the stronger an organization, the harder it can be to change that culture. Culture can be enacted through many different ways, and change can be enacted by hopefully implementing 8 steps. Now, these 8 steps were provided by some of the research that I did, and it was for a article written by McAlerney, Fisher, Heiser, Robbins, and Keheller in 2005. This article states that the best way to enact change is by using 8 different steps. Now, these steps can not really be skipped around or shifted, like shifting the steps and out of order or anything like that. So the first thing to do is to establish a sense of urgency. Make sure that you are informing people why this is important and that it is a time-sensitive manner. So that's the first step. The second is creating a guiding coalition. This is kind of what I was referring to in my hypothesis, that there should be a team in place to help ensure and enforce culture. The third is to develop a vision and strategy. Vision and strategy is vital to helping change the culture. If we are already in a culture that's already established, in order to change that, you have to provide the reason for doing so. You have to help people catch on to that vision. The fourth thing is communicating the change vision. You have to be able to communicate that. You have to be able to say, this is where we're going and this is why we're going there. You have to empower your employees for broad-based action. So you can't say, we're going to start down here and expect you to have, you can't say, we're going to expect you to start up here without having built those building blocks for employees to help make the steps necessary. You can't just expect somebody to run a marathon. You've got to train for it. In the same way, you can't expect culture to shift overnight. You have to provide simple steps, simple actions for people to achieve in order to help them get there. And that goes along with the next step. Step 6 is generating short-term wins. So if you have those steps placed out for your employees, celebrate when they win. Celebrate when they achieve something. In order to do that, you have to be very clear about what your expectations are and what it means to win. The next step is consolidating gains and producing more change. And the final step is anchoring new approaches in your culture. So these two things, in order to get to that new culture, you have to go through all of these other steps. And once you get there, you can anchor your new steps in that culture. You can anchor your new actions. And everybody at that point should know what the vision is, what the strategy is, and how to get there. But you can't get there overnight. Obviously, when we work with other people, especially when we're trying to enforce change in a culture, there can be conflict between people. Now, there are 4 different types of conflict in the culture: active, passive, agreeable, and disagreeable. Now, these are all discussed in the text, so I'm not going to explain each one of them in depth, but the one that I'd like to point out is a collaborative conflict culture. This is the culture that we should strive for in terms of conflict. It brings everybody to the table. It allows people to voice their concerns, voice their frustrations, voice their opinions. And it also allows for everybody to kind of voice what their best case scenario, what their best win is. And we should all strive for a best win for the good of the team, not necessarily an individual. Research shows that this is the most sought after conflict culture. The dominating conflict culture, a passive-aggressive conflict culture, or a disagreeable conflict culture, those can all help contribute to a hostile work environment. And if we're trying to change culture or maintain culture, we do not want a hostile work environment for ourselves or for our employees. The next step that I'm going to talk about in terms of company culture, organizational culture, is the idea of inclusion culture. We all have our own stuff that we bring to work. We've all got our own lives, and it's sometimes hard to check those things at the door. And we should be mindful of that when dealing with other people, that we're not just workers on a line, that we have individual hopes and dreams and struggles and failures. But when those things start to get in the way of accomplishing our tasks, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, because that can lead to not helping, but it can lead to drawing the culture down. It can lead to a very negative workplace. It can also lead to not achieving simple goals and tasks, and certainly not contributing towards the overall organizational culture. So inclusion culture is such that if someone is best suited for a position, that person should be the one who has the job, not the one who's tenured, not the one who's been there the longest, not the one who is the best looking, or maybe graduated at the same college that you did. None of those things should really affect our decisions. It should be who is the most qualified. How do we get them in? How do we make sure that their actions, beliefs align with the company culture? That is inclusion. And in terms of inclusion, that can sometimes mean diversifying. And when we bring in a diverse team, it can sometimes lead to a hard transition for current employees and for the new employees as well. So inclusion culture, while it does demand that the most qualified people get the jobs that they're most qualified for, it also helps to ensure a smooth transition for new employees and make sure that each team member does feel valued. This can also go back to my hypothesis. If we have a team in place that helps to maintain that company culture, when new employees are brought in, they go through kind of a cultural training for the company. You don't just get job training. You don't just meet the people in the office. You learn the vision and you catch the strategy of what that organization is trying to achieve, so that when you are finally trained up, that you understand what your role is in the company and why that is your role in the company. So I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation on organizational culture, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and happy holidays.